So welcome. Looks like we've got a bunch more folks joining in here. And it's great to see you all here today from all around Kentucky and lots of folks even outside of our state borders. Welcome. And we're hoping to keep this event to right around an hour. I'm Jenny. I'm the Education Program Coordinator for OAK, the Organic Association of Kentucky. And I'm joined today by OAK's Director, Brooke Gentile, and Katie Harvey, OAK's CSA Program Coordinator. I'll start off by sharing a little about our nonprofit OAK and what to expect from today's event. And after that brief introduction, I'll pass the mic to Farmer Anna so you can get right into her fields and high tunnels at Rains and Sun Hilltop Farm. Today's field day receives support from the Kentucky Department of Agriculture through a specialty crop block grant. And we're so grateful for KDA's support of our farmer education work. We are a membership-based nonprofit organization, and OAK has over 400 members, farmers, local food advocates, allied professionals, and others who are interested in supporting our mission of advancing organic regenerative agriculture to improve the health of the environment and our communities. We're dedicated to growing ecological resilience, economic viability, and socially just futures for Kentucky farmers through educational, technical, and market resources. We provide farmer education in the form of farmer field days, which are typically on farm and virtual recently. And we develop these events based on the request and feedback from our farmer members in our community. So please provide your feedback in the survey that we're going to share at the end of today's field day. We also offer an annual organic farming conference. And in 2022, it will be our 11th annual gathering. And we provide an organic transition trainer program, which is free technical assistance to OAK members in their preparations for organic certification. A little more on that in just a minute. But OAK is not just about farmer education. We also provide consumer education, offering resources and events that connect Kentuckians with healthy farms and food. And like our online Find a Farm directory, which are listings promoting OAK member farms to folks throughout Kentucky who are seeking to connect with local farmers and healthy foods. Also, OAK's Kentucky Farm Share Coalition, which promotes CSA across the state by connecting organic Kentucky farms directly with businesses and organizations who offer incentives to their employees through their workplace wellness programs in the form of CSA subscription vouchers. So you can learn about all of this and more by signing up for our e-newsletters. Those come monthly in the form of farmer or consumer newsletters. So go ahead and sign up for those on our website. We have a few resources also to share with you, and want to make sure that those who have just joined us, you've got a full screen view of this PowerPoint with these certified organic production resources. You can move my video of me as the active speaker anywhere on your screen, perhaps. Please stay on mute and use the chat for any of the questions that you'd like to share. And you're welcome to use that chat to continue to let us know who you are, where you're coming from, what brings you here today. And as our field day today does highlight a certified organic farm, we'd like to briefly point out these few major resources for your consideration. If you are in Kentucky and pursuing or interested in pursuing organic certification, OAK has organic transition trainers who can assist you in preparing for that with the record keeping, the application, interpreting the regulations. We help take that guesswork out of the process and allow these participating farmers to confidently move towards organic certification. We've done this with over 144 Kentucky farms over the past 4 years, and we offer this technical assistance free to OAK members. Second, our partner, Kentucky Department of Agriculture, is one of the certifiers that Kentucky farmers could consider using for certification. KDA certifies the majority of organic operations in our state. And third, the National Organic Program at USDA is the federal regulatory program that develops and enforces uniform national standards for organically produced ag products in the US. So with our visit with Anna at Rains and Sun Hilltop Farm today, we'll share production techniques and considerations appropriate for USDA certified organic farms. For a deeper look at those practices, we'll make reference to the NOP regulations throughout the slides today to highlight relevant regulations. The example here is this organic farm fence post sign, which corresponds with NOP 205.202 land requirements with distinct defined boundaries. And each of these NOP references shown in the orange link directly to the NOP website's listing of the regulations and practices addressed in that slide. All of those links will be in an email in the form of a PDF shared with you after the event, as well as the recording. So, all right, now it's tool time. We've had fun putting this event together, and we're happy to highlight the work they're doing at Rains and Sun Hilltop Farm. I'm excited to introduce you today to Anna Rains.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. Thanks so much, Jenny and everybody at Oak. So, yes, our farm is in Independence, Kentucky. We are on 13 acres, but we only have about 2 of it in production. We applied for to be certified organic in 2020, and were inspected in 2020, but then just got our
Anna, I'm not sure, I'm not hearing. Oh, your audio is cut out a little bit.
Yeah.
You start again? Oh, there you are. I don't know what that was, but welcome back.
Okay. Hopefully it'll stay good, but if it happens again and we need to shift gears, just let me know.
Oh, sure, thanks.
But we were certified naturally grown for a few years, from 2015 to 2018. And then realized that it just made a lot of sense to be certified organic because the program is so great in Kentucky. KDA really provides an inexpensive option. Oak is there to help us. We use the transition trainer program. So that was really helpful as well. So for us, it made a lot of sense. We started really small with just 10 shares in 2013, but then this year we have quite a few shares. It's about 70 every week, but that translates to 40 full shares and 60 half shares. And I have 4 people working with me, which is kind of a lot. None of them are completely full-time. 2 nearly in to work 2 or 3 days a week. And it's worked out nicely for us. So CSA is our major thing. And then we also do 2 farmers markets as well. Yeah, you can go ahead. So the production system that we use on the farm is really based on minimal tillage. And we do this for a lot of reasons. We knew when we started out that we wanted to just have a walk-behind tractor and not a full-size tractor. Our acreage is pretty hilly. We just have about 4 flat-ish acres on a hilltop. And if some of you are also from Kentucky, you maybe have similar kinds of property where there's just not a lot of flat ground. And the smaller implement allows us some flexibility. And we also just wanted to keep the soil healthy. So the less you disturb it, typically, the better it is. So we have a permanent bed system that we've created, and we just do minimal actions on it. It results in a lot better soil ecology and structure over time. We've seen huge improvements. You're not bringing up weed seeds from down low in the soil. And then we of course, the cost of a walk-behind tractor is much less than a full-size tractor, and the maintenance is relatively easy. I wanted to give a little shout out to Earth Tools, which is like a wonderful walk-behind tractor and other tool supplier that's in Owenston, Kentucky. That was another big reason for us to choose this route, because we have that supplier close to us. And when we do have certain maintenance issues we can't deal with, they help us out with that. So that's been wonderful. Okay. So for today's presentation, we're going to go over several different things. We'll start with how we prepare beds and work the soil, the minimal amount of stuff we do. Talk about seeding and transplanting, what we do for weed management, how we deal with pest and disease issues. We'll talk about our season extension apparatus. We have 4 high tunnels and some other stuff that's interesting. How we do irrigation here, and then a bit about harvest and post-harvest. And I just wanted to quick mention, this picture is just a little like area we have set up that's sort of a transient space. We call it our storage area. We're now upgrading to a bigger pack shed, but we just use some old pallets and some hooks and different things. And it's just been like a nice organized space. And I can't stress enough how nice it is to just have all of your stuff in a central spot where it's organized, and it has a spot so people know where to put it, and it gets back there. And that just helps everything run so much more smoothly when that's the case. So that's really key. All right, so let's get into bed preparation and well, what our soil looks like here on the farm. We divide our farm beds up into sections of 4, and all of our beds are 100 feet long and 30 inches wide, which works with the implements on our BCS walk behind. Right now we have 18 fields of 4 beds, and then also 4 hoop houses. We're opening up some new space this year, so we'll be able to add 2 more fields, so 20 total. And then we're hoping eventually to add a big greenhouse, but that'll be another day, another talk. Our soil, it was funny because I just was looking up exactly what soil type it is on our LinkGIS website the other day, and it said it was Nicholas silt loam, which sounds better than what it actually is, it seems like, because there's quite a lot of clay in our soil. But you know, it wasn't terrible when we started because cattle used to graze this area, so there was some organic matter in place, which was good. But we've definitely also seen huge improvements in soil texture and organic matter over the time we've been farming. So that's been great. We know that we've been improving because we do soil testing each year. We had a little bit of a weird low pH to start off with. So we addressed that by adding lime. Other things like boron is a little low in our soil, so that's something we know we have to add. But other than that, it's just like the major macronutrients for plants, the nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. So addressing fertility, we do use cover crops. The more we do with cover crops, the more we would like to do, but it's also tough because we're space limited. So we'll talk a lot about that in some videos to come. We use a lot of bagged amendments that are OMRI listed, so they're organic approved, and a lot of times contain various composted manures. We've had a hard time on our farm finding manure that we feel good about, like horse manure that we feel good about, because it's hard to find good composted horse manure sometimes. It's not fully composted. We've had issues with persistent herbicides years ago in some manure we got, and then also just weed seeds coming in on manure that's not fully composted. So we're a little bit shy about using too much manure that's not fully composted. But there's always a possibility we'll get into composting ourselves later. All right. So Jenny's going to start. There's a little video of me using the flail mower here. That's just shows you how well that mows down a cover crop. But when we're getting ready to prepare a bed, we will typically mow it if it has either an existing crop or a cover crop or even some weeds that are there. We'll mow that down. And then we'll put silage tarps on the bed for 2 to 3 weeks, or if it's springtime, it'll be longer than that. And that will, all of that plant material will then be kind of digested into the soil. So the worms, the different microorganisms, they just Okay. Hopefully you all can hear me again. My internet connection went out again. And so then after we take the tarps off, we will broad fork about every 12 or 18 inches. And then we'll add amendments. We've used different things in the past. Alfalfa meal is a nice one. It's got a balance of NPK and then also a lot of micronutrients. Composted chicken manure we've used, but it's a really high phosphorus manure. So if you use it over time, you can accumulate too much phosphorus at times. This year we're using Revita Pro from Ohio Earth Food. I think there's something good about using different things over time just to kind of balance out what's going on with your soil. And then once we've amended, we'll harrow with our BCS before we seed or transplant. Okay, this is our first video here where we'll be talking about using the tarps to turn beds and the types of tarps we use on the farm.
We are taking tarps off of a new field block that we're going to prep this week. Mostly on the farm we have the thinner silage tarps that are black on one side and white on the other side. This bed is actually covered with, they're like the semi-truck kind of really thick tarps that we got years ago when we first started doing tarping. There are good and bad things about these tarps. One, they've got grommets, so we can use like sod staples to keep them down instead of rock bags, so that can be useful. They also seem to kill off the weeds or crop residues a little bit faster because they're thicker. And we have them in different widths, so we've got like 2 sets here that cover about 2 beds each. It can be nice to have some different sized tarps versus the silage tarps cover a full field block of 4 beds, and these cover 2 beds at a time. When you're turning crops over, sometimes you want to just turn 2 beds over at a time, so you can use a smaller tarp for that purpose, and that can be nice. So after they take the tarps off, eventually we'll broad fork these beds, put amendments on, and harrow them, and then we'll be ready to plant it. We are taking tarps off of a new.
All right. I just wanted to make a quick mention about the type of broad fork that we use because it was shown in that last video. Initially, we had gotten broad forks that have the round tines from Johnny's when we first started out, but now we're using a heavier duty like steel kind of knife-like broad fork that's from Meadow Creature. And those are heavy duty and they're awesome and they make really quick work of broad forking. So we like those. We think they're a good investment. So now let's talk a little bit about cover cropping. Like I said, we would really like to get more into doing cover crops. If we had more space, it would almost be nice to have half the farm in cover crops and half not in cover crops. But what we do is pretty simple. So early spring, we'll do some Austrian winter peas into a bed that's going to get a main season crop probably in June or something like that, so that we have time. If we seed them in March, we have time to let them grow before turning over. Summer cover crop mix that we use is cowpeas, sun hemp, sorghum Sudan grass, and sometimes we'll throw tillage radish in there as well to help break the soil up. So that's a nice mix of nitrogen fixers and just general biomass and tilth producers. If we want to do a quick smother, we can do buckwheat. We haven't used that a whole lot, but it always seems like maybe we'll have a 6-week window where we could throw that on a bed. But that can be useful if you need to get a bed in better shape for weed seeds. And then in the fall or winter, if a bed is ready to go, doesn't have any crop in it, and doesn't have tarps on it, we'll put winter wheat, vetch, and clover, and maybe winter peas mixed in there as well for overwintering. And then I have a little tip here at the bottom that the first farmer that came and inspected our farm for CNG had told me this when I was worried about how many weeds I had in a certain bed. She's like, well, it's the springtime, and as long as you mow them down before they go to seed, you just pretend like they're a cover crop. And I thought that was good advice. And that is one of the benefits of doing the flail mowing and incorporating all those crop residues, weed residues, whatever, back into the soil. That feeds the soil too. So it doesn't always have to be, you know, a seeded cover crop. All right,
We
so
are at
now
our
we're
field that
going
we
to talk
recently
about.
mowed. It was in an overwintered cover crop of mostly winter wheat. We do, for our farm, cover crops are either an overwintered thing that we might do on a bed that we're going to put into vegetable production in the main part of the season. Or in these fields, we're actually completely taking them out of production, and they're going to be in cover crops all year in order to renovate them. They're some of the earliest beds we had here on the farm, and they just need to get some more tilth and more biomass, more nutrition, and we're going to use a summer cover crop. So after we mowed down our winter wheat cover crop and then put these tarps on last week, and you can see that already the winter wheat is starting to be killed off. So probably in a couple more weeks, these beds will be ready to prepare for our summer cover crops. And we'll put in a mix of sorghum Sudan grass and cowpeas and sun hemp, which will grow through the summer and give us some really nice biomass. Field peas or Austrian winter peas are another great cover crop that kind of work in a time frame where we can still grow vegetables in these beds. So sometimes people plant them in the fall for overwintering. These peas were actually planted in the early spring, and they are about ready for mowing. But the nice thing about this as a cover crop is it's also a vegetable that you can harvest early on. So in our very first CSA shares, we include pea shoots. We'll harvest the tender tips of these peas and give them to our members in the first shares. And then we'll be able to mow these beds, let all that great biomass decay, and the worms can stir it up under some tarps for a couple weeks, and then we'll be able to plant these into vegetables later.
All right, so now let's talk a little bit about what we do for seeding and transplanting. So like most farms, we try to transplant as much as possible just because, you know, it gives you more security that the bed's going to be filled out. There's no unknowns about germination and things like that. So that's great. We use trays, 72s, 50 cell trays that are kind of standard. And then the 128s we also use for a lot of crops. And we found that you need a sturdier 128 to hold up, because otherwise they just fall apart in a couple of years. So we are pretty happy with some trays that we got from Bootstrap Farmer that are more heavy duty for the 128s. The picture on the left here is our germination chamber. So that is an old refrigerator that we have a fish tank in the bottom of and a bucket heater. And that keeps that germination chamber. We have it just set at 75, which seems to be pretty good. And then the upper level just is a little bit cooler than that because some of the heat gets up into there, but not as much. So it works out for some like lettuces and spinach and things. Our greenhouse is not that big. It's just a 12 by 20 structure. We have it covered with solar wrap, which is like a giant piece of bubble wrap basically. And the benefit of that material is that it has air, you know, trapped inside all those bubbles. So it has an insulative value in the greenhouse, where otherwise you would have to have 2 layers of plastic and blow air in between it. So we don't need to have a fan and blow air to get insulation in that house. And then we just use heat mats to heat the flats in there. So really a pretty simple method. And then you can see the pictures on the right show the differences between types of 128s. There on the one on the right is the bootstrap farmer, which is a little taller, and the cells are more rigid. As far as a soil that we use, the soil mix, Vermont Compost we've been using for the last 3 or 4 years, and it's just a fantastic product. There's a group order in Louisville that we've been going in on with, and that works nicely. It has enough nutrition in it that we really don't need to add anything else unless the plants are going to be in flats for longer than 5 or 6 weeks. And then if that's the case, we'll water in with fish emulsion every few days. So that's that. So if we are going to direct seed, we have 2 different types of seeders, just a basic earthway seeder, which is on the top here. And that one we will use for beans and peas mostly. That's really all we use it for. I guess we use it for cover crops as well, so it's good for that. So that one, you can adjust the depth of the little furrowing thing, which is okay. Hopefully I'm back and okay now again. So for smaller seeds, we have a jang seeder. We invested in a jang seeder a few years ago, and that is much, much better for things like carrots and turnips, radishes, mustard greens, baby kale. Those are the primary things we use the jang for. Okay. To make our spacing more streamlined when we are transplanting, we use this Dibbler, which is on the left. So it's a roller wheel, and then there's these little snap-in metal dibblers, and that roller wheel has 36 squares around the outside of it, and you can snap those dibblers in different orientations. So we've found that we can reliably get 8-inch, about 8-inch, about 12-inch, and about 18-inch spacing by doing different numbers of those dibblers around the circle. And then like you can do 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows, depending on how you orient them. This has been really great just for ease of planting and getting straight rows, and everybody knows where something's supposed to go if there's a little hole there. So that works out really nicely. You can see kind of what the holes look like in the middle there, and 2 of my employees are planting some lettuces. And we just use these little soil knives to plant. Those are fantastic. This year, we got a paper pot transplanter actually from a grant from American Farmland Trust that Brooke had notified me about, and I applied for, and we were able to get the paper pot transplanter. This has been pretty great for a number of crops for us. I think maybe many of you are familiar with this, but the pots are in a little paper chain, and then they grow for a few weeks, and then you'll use this special transplanter, which is the orange thing on the right side of the screen, to help you pull the little chain out into the soil so they all just get planted. So we've been, it's not a perfect thing, and getting the soil just right for successful transplanting is, a little bit tough, but we've had pretty good success with spinach, beets, peas, baby kale, salad turnips in clusters worked really good, and mini lettuce. And then the jury is still out. We tried to get some early beans in the hoop house, and that didn't work so great, but I'm not sure if it was the paper pot that was the problem. And cilantro we tried, but wasn't so great. But it's definitely been fun, and it's created some efficiencies. Okay, so we'll switch gears to after the crop's planted, what do we do about keeping it weeded? In our soil type, we find that the stirrup hose work really well for our clay soil. So that's what you see people doing on the left-hand side. Also, things that are going to be in the ground for a long period of time, we'll plant into landscape fabric so that we don't have to worry so much about the weeds. And then for carrots especially, we'll use a flame weeder a week after we seed them, just before they pop up, to kill any weeds that have germinated before the carrots come up. And we have started using some wood chips in aisles. We'd probably like to do more of that, but sometimes getting arborists to drop them isn't the easiest thing. But in our new cover crop beds this summer, we've got wood chips in the aisles, and we'll see how that goes. All right, let's talk more about weeds in the aisles.
A little bit about how we deal with weeds in our aisles. So you can see here that we've got some weeds in these aisles. And these are relatively quick crops. So we've got spinach here, and I've got salad greens here. So when we're doing quick crops, we typically don't worry about the weeds in the aisle, because after these are harvested in a few weeks, we are going to mow and tarp this whole section. And so the tarp will take care of those weeds, and we don't need to worry about it. Even though it doesn't look, you know, the most beautiful, it would just be a waste of our time to try to deal with these. We have heavy clay soil, and it's really hard to hoe these weeds. So typically, if we're going to do something about it, we would lay down landscape fabric in the aisle. I just wanted to say a little bit about how we deal with weeds in our aisles. So you can see here. All right, so here we are at our brassica block, and these are crops that stay in the ground a little bit longer. So we do go ahead and put landscape fabric in the aisles to keep those weeds down. It also has the benefit of looking really nice. It makes you feel good when you look out at your crops. What's great about doing this is that you don't have to leave, if it's a crop that stays in the ground for a long period of time, like say it's a Brussels sprouts and it's 90 days or something, you don't actually have to leave the fabric in that whole time. We move it around almost like we use our other kinds of tarps, because as long as it's been there for 3 weeks, something like that, 4 weeks maybe, all of the weeds that are under there will be smothered, and it'll just be a clean area. So then you can take it up and use it somewhere else, so that you don't have to have landscape fabric for your entire farm. You can use it in multiple places over a period of time. As far as weed control in the beds, mostly what we use here on our farm are stirrup hose. And those are great for our clay soil. We just kind of try to skim the surface, get the weeds when they're small. Do it on a sunny, windy day if possible. And that works great. And we'll do that a few times. These beds have been hoed, I think, twice, maybe 3 times. And they're looking pretty good. There's just a few weeds here and there. So that works great. Mostly we use 5-inch stirrup hose, especially for crops like this that have bigger spacing. And then if we're working in crops that have more tight spacing, we'll use 3.5-inch stirrup hose.
Awesome. So here we have a couple of videos that are showing our power harrow in action. So this is the last stage of bed prep. And you can see that we're really just disturbing the top inch, maybe 2 inches of soil. So we're not really getting down deep, just enough to allow us to transplant into it easily or direct seed into it easily. I also wanted to mention that when we are initially preparing beds, we do have a rotary plow for our tractor. And that is what we use to form the beds. So it kind of throws soil up to one side. It's not exactly rototilling. You're not completely inverting soil layers, but it's definitely more disturbance than a power harrow. And we have to do that as well every few years on our permanent beds, because over time, when it rains, they'll kind of flatten out. And we just run that rotary plow in the aisle, and that throws soil up onto the bed to keep them a little bit higher. Okay. So I mentioned that we plant longer term crops into landscape fabric as a weed prevention strategy. So you can see in the right-hand side that we've got some onions and some garlic also that we do into landscape fabric. That's especially key, and I'll talk about that in a video here. But also peppers, eggplant, cucumbers, squash. I forgot to put sweet potato on here. That's another one we do, and we'll just harvest the big cluster instead of any of the little shoots. Any vining crop, it's really nice to have in fabric. Otherwise, the weeds get out of control.
Right, so we are in our onion field, and this is another good example of how we use landscape fabric on the farm. So we have found that planting our onions into landscape fabric is really helpful. Onions are just one of those crops that grow straight up and they're not going to shade out any weeds. So if you are just planting them into bare soil, you're going to have to do a lot of hoeing and a lot of weeding. So we burn holes into landscape fabric. We've got 4 rows here, and they're 8-inch spaced holes. We made a little plywood form, and then we were able to just burn holes using a torch. I think a lot of farmers have done that. So that's great. And then all we have to do is come through and hand pick weeds a couple times, and that's not too big of a deal. Then this is also a block where these crops are going to be in the ground for a good amount of time. So we put landscape fabric in the aisles. A lot of this stuff is just, you know, scraps of things or pieces that we might have used for some other purpose a while ago. Sometimes they've got some holes in them. That's okay. You know, you pick out a few of the weeds from the holes, but most of the aisle is covered. And just as a contrast, you can see one of our aisles hasn't been covered yet. And so that's what everything would look like if we didn't put the aisle fabrics down. And right now, I mean, it looks bad enough, but in a few weeks, those weeds would grow taller and they would start to like vine into the onions and create big problems. So it's nice to be able to cover that up.
All right, yeah, just cover it up. It's amazing how good it feels when you just cover those weeds up too. Don't let them go to seed. That's what you need to remember. Okay, so let's switch gears to pest and disease management. So our primary strategies are prevention. Row covers are something we use a lot of in the spring for flea beetles, and in the fall again. So flea beetles on mustard greens and turnips and radishes and things like that. Also, they can be good, like when we first plant our summer squashes, we'll put row covers to keep the cucumbers to keep cucumber beetles out. And then the other thing that's just so key is to constantly be scouting, whether it's, you know, while you're harvesting, or you set aside a time every week to go out through your fields and look for things that you know are going to be an issue. It's probably a good idea just to spend some time getting familiar with pests that are common in your area as well, so that you know, because we've had issues where, like, we had some really bad harlequin bug problems like 4 or 5 years ago, and I didn't know what it was at first. I'm like, oh, what's this cool looking stink bug thing that's orange and black? It's really neat. And I should have looked it up because there were several of them on our brassicas, and it was too late by the time I realized it was a major infestation. But now we can totally control the harlequin bugs by just looking for them early and squishing the first few that we find and just kind of scouting, and then it's like not a problem at all. So that's really awesome. Picture on the left shows the Mexican bean beetle larva. Those are another one that if you get to them early, you can kind of keep it from being too explosive of a problem, but it seems like those are a little hard to control. There's not a lot of good organic controls for some of those things too. We do have a backpack sprayer that we'll use for some things that I find to be useful and that actually work, and that we can't control with exclusion or picking. So Dipel is the BT that you can spray on brassicas for caterpillars. You know, you need to make sure they're there and not be spraying it, you know, 1 or 2 times a week. But if you can control them, you can spray them every day. And then the other thing that we do is we too much. It's still, I think, a regulated substance for organics, so it's not something you can just willy-nilly spray. We'll use kaolin clay for cucumber beetles. That works a little bit early on. One of the areas that's kind of interesting to me is there's a number of biological insecticides and fungicides. We've had some good luck trying to deal with aphids with a fungal bioinsecticide. Bioceres was the name of the one we used, but there's a number of them out there. And the idea is that it's a fungus that attacks an insect. Oak actually had a speaker in 2019, I think, that talked about this. It was really cool. And that was kind of exciting to me. And then there's also some bacterial biofungicides. So it's sort of like, you know, you're using nature, you're using the natural competition that somewhat exists and sort of enhancing it. And hopefully some of those things stick around in your soil if possible. And just, you know, trying to encourage beneficials whenever you can, and having the kinds of areas around the farm that encourage other things. Oh, we've got the deer fence. Yeah. So those are the big pests. All right. So let's move on to the protected culture and season extension. We have 4 high tunnels. They're on the small side, 12 to 14 feet. And there's some that are caterpillar. There's some that we've finished up a little bit more. And then also, one thing people don't think about when they think about season extension is trying to do cooler crops in the summer. But we try to do lettuces throughout the summer, and shade cloth is really important for that. So that's something you see in the bottom right-hand corner there. That helps us do the summer lettuce. And let's see, yeah, we'll have a video here. So this is our roll-up end wall that we have put on one of our bigger high tunnels.
One of our 4 high tunnels.
So that was kind of an easy.
The one we're in is a 14-foot wide high tunnel that we purchased from Farmer's Friend. This one we put up, I think, 2 years ago. And we purchased this one and another one just like it at the same time because we could get free shipping if we got both of them. And it's also important to know that we were able to get a 50% cost share for these tunnels through CAPE funding, the KADF funding in our county. So that was great. They're fairly low-tech tunnels. Initially, they were just set up as caterpillar tunnels. And actually just this spring, we transitioned this one to have roll-up sides. This, I think, is really, really important. The caterpillar tunnels are cheap to set up, and you're just using, you know, paracord rope to keep them tight. But in order to vent them, you have to lift up the plastic at each of the hoops and keep them up. And then when it rains, sometimes we had issues with the plastic ripping. And the plastic is not inexpensive. So we're realizing that having roll-up sides is both a time saver and keeps your plastic nice for a lot longer. So in here, we actually, instead of putting boards up for the roll-up sides hip boards, we put these poles up, which are the same like fence post kind of pole that we use in the purlins and that the bows are made of. And so we did that because we won't ever have to replace it. It won't rot. So that's great. Because one of our other houses, we have wood there and eventually that's going to need to be replaced. So that was something new that we tried here. And then we've got conduit running along here, and that's what the plastic rolls up onto for the roll-up sides. So that works pretty well. As far as what's in the tunnel here, in the summer months, we've got tomatoes and peppers in our tunnels. So we've got a line down this middle bed of indeterminate tomatoes that we will vertically trellis on this trellis line with little clips, and we'll be pruning these heavily. So they have kind of intense spacing. They're just 9 inches apart. In the early part of the season, we've been trying some interplanting in the tunnels. Beets seem to work well on the sides of the tomatoes. So here we've got some golden beets, and then those will be ready in another 3 or 4 weeks, and then we'll put tarps in the middle here so that we can keep the weed pressure down during the season for the tomatoes and the peppers as well. So we've got peppers on the sides of these tunnels. Those we've got the posts pounded in so that we'll be able to do basket weaving to support those peppers. They really do need it once they get a little bit bigger. And then once we transition to the winter season, these crops will come out usually in October, and we'll put greens in these houses for winter production. We are in another one of our tunnels. This is actually the first tunnel that we put up. It's kind of short. It's only 12 feet wide. It's just a simple caterpillar tunnel. In this one, in the summer, we've got determinate tomatoes that we do in here. So these tomatoes don't grow as tall, they don't get as bushy, and they are ideal for just basket weaving in order to keep them supported. And they grow really great in the tunnel. Just being able to control their water in here it results in a really nice product, so we like that a lot. We've also got beets in here, interplanted, that'll come out in a few weeks, and then we've got our cool weather crops, some kale that we planted in real early March that we're harvesting from now, and we'll eventually put ginger in the middle of that.
All right. So let's talk a bit about our irrigation strategies. We do both drip tape and some overhead irrigation. The overhead irrigation, we have two kinds. We've got misters, which is what you see in the top left. Those have a finer mist and are great for germinating crops when we're direct seeding carrots, especially. Those are what we like to use. And then just for regular irrigation of quicker crops, we the wobblers are awesome because you only need 4 for a 100-foot bed to get coverage for the field block of 4 fields. So that's been awesome. They also don't require as much water pressure as the misters do. So that's also really nice, but the droplet size is bigger so that if you're germinating crops, it's not as good, but we like those for our lettuces and other quick crops. If a crop is going to be in the field for a long time, or if it's in landscape fabric, for sure, we'll use drip tape. So that's what you see on the right there.
Use a couple different kinds of irrigation here on the farm. The overhead sprinkler type irrigation we have these fine misters, which are spaced every 5 feet. And those are great for germinating crops because they produce a really fine mist. So we use those anytime we're germinating things, so especially carrots, which we have in these beds, although it includes some weeds too that we'll be taking care of. And then the sprinklers or misters are good for salad crops. We do a lot of salanovas for salad mix. And then behind me, we've got some cilantro and dill and some more lettuces. So we pretty much don't use drip tapes anytime we're doing lettuce or quick crops that need to be cooled, especially in the summer. It can be important to run the sprinklers just to keep them cool. So these are nice for that. We don't have the greatest water pressure up here. So one thing that we do with these fine mist sprinklers, they need a little bit more pressure to run well. Is we split them, our beds are 100 feet, but we split them into 2 sections of 50 so that we have enough pressure to run, put them in the middle, and then they can run across 4 beds. And maybe this is another good spot to say that all of our fields are set up in sections of 4 beds. These are
Okay. Yeah, I kind of talked about the wobblers already. So then we're on to harvesting. So for harvest, we're just using simple knives. The ones we like a lot are those little red knives. They seem to be great for most things. And our harvest crates, we have two sizes, a smaller yellow and a bigger red one, that seem to work well. They can nest or stack, which is really awesome when you're trying to store them. Those we actually ordered in from Canada, because that was the supplier that had them, but they work great and they weren't that expensive really. And then right now we're currently working on getting our new pack shed set up where we're going to have a better wash pack set up. But right now we just do it in down by our house in a little driveway setup. So we've got a spray table and a big wash tub that's just one of those like stock tanks. We have separate crates that we use for storing the veggies in the cooler and also for packing shares. And that's what you see on the bottom right down there, those gray crates. Okay, so cold storage, we have a small walk-in cooler currently that's powered by an air conditioner and a cool bot. So that's what you see on the left. It's about a 4x6 space. I think like maximum we could fit, 24, maybe 26 crates in there. And we are working currently on building a new 8x10 cooler in our pack shed, which is going to be awesome because we were completely maxed out on space this spring. It seems like early June, there's a lot of greens and like big things and broccoli's coming. And we kind of lost some broccoli because we didn't have enough space. So it'll be awesome to have that new setup. Our issue now is just figuring out how to get utilities run up to this new pack shed because it's actually on we have 2 address parcels on our farm. And so there's been a bit of an issue trying to figure out how to get that set up. So that's just another can of worms to talk about, maybe for another day. So just in summing up here, the tools that we use on our farm, we've chosen because, they're right sized for our scale, the walk behind tractor and a lot of hand tools. It works and it's, fairly efficient for our about 2 acre scale. We're trying to keep the soil healthy, but also like thinking about human health, both in the vegetables we produce and then also in our workload and not making things too arduous for ourselves. This seems like this system it really works well without crazy amounts of hard work. We've chosen and kept things that really help increase the efficiency of our production. So like the paper pot is one thing that we think is really gonna make a big difference on certain things. The tarps are huge. And then, things have grown and changed and evolved as our farm has grown and we've tried things and learned what works best. And even little kids can help on the farm. That's my youngest, Julia, there helping out. So thank you guys so much for coming. I know you got a lot of questions.
Yeah, we've had quite a few questions. Thank you, Anna, so much for sharing all the information and diving into the details of all these great tools that you've evolved into over the years and held on to. In the chat, we're going to go ahead and put the survey link. And please, participants, go ahead and click on that once it pops up so that you can easily locate it after we wrap up. Give us your opinion on this and anything you want to see in the future. And speaking of wrap up, I will send an email out within the week that provides you with all today's slides, including the hyperlinks, as well as the event recording link that will be on YouTube. For any of you who are interested in following up with Anna after this, you'll have her contact information here and in those slides. And you'll also have Brooke's contact info for any of you Kentucky farmers or those of you who work with Kentucky farmers who might be considering organic certification. Brooke is your go-to person for the Oak Organic Transition Trainer Program. You're welcome to reach out to me directly about today's event or on topics you'd like to see in the future. We are planning 2022 conference right now. So send me your ideas. And we're also working on 3 remaining field days in this season. The first 2 of those are going to be virtual, and then we are planning to be at UK South Farm in October. So those of you who are close enough to join us, mark your calendars for October 20. You can find information about all of those on our website. And this is too much to mention. I'm not even going to mention anything except to say that it's here for you. It will be in the slides, and all of those have hyperlinks, but a lot of great organic production resources that we think are important for anybody diving a little deeper into this. And we want you to go ahead and keep those questions coming in the chat. We're going to talk with Anna a little bit, and we really do want you to fill out that survey. So please share your thoughts that we will also share with Anna and that we will build future events with. We've got a few minutes before 3 o'clock. Jump off if you need to, and you can come back and watch the recording or stick around, because now we are going to do a little bit of Q&A with Miss Anna. All right, welcome back, Anna. You had a bit of a breather.
Thanks.
We have several that are coming up here, and they kind of bounce around. So I'm going to go to the top. With tarps and landscape fabrics, you're using that a lot on all your beds and your aisles, a little bit of everywhere. Have you had any problems with spreading soil diseases or anything of that nature? And if so, how are you preventing or mitigating that as you make use of those as a tool?
That is a great question. We do use them all over, and we haven't thought a huge amount about that. I know there are some soil-borne diseases. We had some issues a number of years back with brassicas, I think, that had some kind of rot that I was concerned might be soil-borne. And so in those cases, we might designate a tarp, as a certain kind of thing. We haven't done anything like sprayed them down with bleach or anything like that. So, it seems like the biology is doing its job and the crop rotations are doing okay because we haven't had persistent issues. But I do worry about that, just with other pests too. And are there like eggs that are staying on things, and row covers? It's kind of the same deal where I think we get like aphids that are on a row cover and then I can't use it again because I just am going to transfer like aphid eggs to the new crop. So that's a really good point. And I don't have like a totally clear answer, but.
Yeah, well, I know we were at Berea College Farm last year for a virtual field day, which is also on our Oak YouTube channel. And they were talking about in their strawberry, in the high tunnels, they were growing strawberries and had fungal issues that they ended up scrubbing all of their landscape fabric with an Omni approved oxidator, one of those, with scrub mops. And they would hand scrub every single one of those and then leave them out in the sun to dry and put them back in the tunnel. So that's one possibility, and hopefully you won't have to deal with any of that going forward. But great question, thank you. Thinking about the high tunnels, how often do you use cover crops in those? Are you working into your rotation cover crops in the tunnels?
We have not yet done any cover cropping in the tunnels, but I have one of mine right now where it seems like the soil needs it. So I am thinking about how we can fit those in. It's really tough. I don't know. I remember at some presentation recently, somebody talking about doing sweet potatoes in the tunnel as kind of like a smothering thing. Not that that's exactly a cover crop, but just working some different kinds of crops in there and rebuilding the soil. Even just mowing crops down, and tarping, I think does help. But yeah, we haven't, and I would like to, but it's just so hard because it's such high value space to fit it in.
Yeah, maybe those winter peas, huh?
Mhm.
Speaking of cover crops, someone asked if you have any tool recommendations for use with cover crops that are not gas-powered tools for mowing them down. So electric or hand tool recommendations, perhaps.
Well, I mean, I know, like, you know, in the past people just use the scythe, and I've got one of my employees is really into stuff like that. So he thinks about that kind of thing. Also, I feel like I've seen some interesting DIY kind of like roller crimper things that people would use. So that's a possibility, because that might, you know, kill it off enough that then if you put a tarp after that, you could get good kill off that way. But if you just put a tarp on without doing anything, it's going to take a long time for that residue to be incorporated. And sometimes the crops get huge, so like you just have a lot of biomass to deal with. It's a little tough.
Yeah. Your BCS that you're using both in the tunnels and outside, do you find that easy to use, to handle it? And what type of BCS do you have?
Ours is a BCS 853. It's a diesel engine, which uses a lot less gas, I think. I don't know. My husband was the one who picked it out and had different ideas about it. But so that's the one we use. I do find it fairly easy to use, but there is a bit of a learning curve just with all the different controls on it. And then some implements are heavier than others. So the power harrow is really heavy. And that can take a little bit to try to turn it. So that's not as easy as the mower. The mower is incredibly easy to use. And the rotary plow that we didn't talk about too much is also a little bit hard because it kind of jumps around a little bit, but it's not too bad.
Yeah. With your bed prep, you talked about several amendments that you are using, but you didn't mention compost specifically. Is there any compost that you have or do use?
So we have used composted horse manure in the past, but like I mentioned at the beginning, we've had some issues with persistent herbicides and weed seeds and things, or maybe it wasn't fully composted. So that's been a bit of an issue. We have used pelleted composted chicken manure, which you can get in bags, which really is convenient just for spreading without big equipment to have things in bags. I would love to eventually kind of start up our own composting situation if we can get some materials, and we talk about getting chickens and having some setup. So I think about that for the future, but for right now, it's tough for us to find a reliable source of composted horse manure, which is what you would think you'd be able to find a lot of in Kentucky. And you can definitely find the manure, but just there's so many questions about it that it makes, and we've been burned a couple of times, so it makes me nervous. So I like to tell people just to watch out for that. I mean, if you're worried about persistent herbicides, you can do a little test by mixing some compost into some soil mix and then have some soil mix without it and grow some peas because they'll germinate pretty quickly. And you can tell within a couple weeks if they are affected negatively by some persistent herbicide. So that's a good point to think about.
Two more questions. One's a quick answer. How tall is that deer fence of yours?
It's 8 feet tall.
Yeah. And wrapping up with a favorite topic for all organic farmers, right? Crop rotation. What is your typical rotation that you use with your beds, or do you have one that's typical?
Yeah, I didn't really talk about that. So ours is pretty simple, where we're just rotating between heavier feeders and light feeders. But then also we're not putting the same crop family back in a bed if it's one of our heavy feeder crop families for at least 3 or 4 years. So if it's like brassicas or cucurbits or something like that, that it won't be back in the same place for at least 3 years. And then it'll rotate every other year with like the quick crops and salad greens and things like that.
And you do those blocks of 4 beds all in one at a time as you're moving around. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, Anna also did a great conference session for us for those of you who are CSA farmers. We do have that available on our Oak YouTube channel as well. So that will also be linked in the email I send out to you. We are really grateful to you, Anna, for sharing all the information today and beyond. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Please fill out that survey, give us your feedback, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you all.